Hey everyone, and welcome back to Key Safety Talks on YouTube. Today we're going to be looking at something that might seem a little theoretical at first.
Yeah.
But I think you'll see as we go along how it really connects to the work that we do in safety every day.
Exactly.
So we're going to be talking about some classic management theories.
Right.
You know, Maslow, McGregor, Herzberg.
Right, yeah.
And we're going to be figuring out how these big ideas can help us become better safety leaders.
Yeah.
And build stronger safety cultures.
That's the goal. What's so fascinating about this is that these theories were really developed, for kind of general management organizations.
Right.
But they offer incredible insights into kind of the human side of safety. We're talking about understanding what motivates people, why they make certain decisions, and how we can create environments that encourage those safe behaviors. It goes way beyond just rules and regulations.
Okay, yeah. Let's unpack this a little bit. So I definitely remember encountering these theories back in school.
Yeah.
But honestly, my memory's a bit hazy.
Yeah.
Let's start with that Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay.
That's that pyramid thing, right?
Pyramid, exactly.
How does that even relate to safety?
So yeah, the pyramid, it's a visual representation of human needs. And they start with the most basic ones at the bottom. Think about food, water, shelter. The things we literally need to survive.
Got it.
And then as we kind of move up the pyramid, we get to safety and security, belonging and social connection, esteem and self-respect. And finally, at the very top, self-actualization. Maslow's idea was you can't really focus on those higher level needs until those more basic ones are met.
So are you saying that if someone's worried about, let's say, their job security or they're feeling isolated on the team,
right,
are they really going to be focused on hazard identification?
That's the idea. It's like we need to create a workplace where people feel fundamentally safe and connected before we can expect them to fully engage in those higher level safety initiatives.
I see.
And that's where things get really interesting for safety professionals. If we think about that second level, safety and security, it's not just about physical safety from hazards, it's also about feeling psychologically safe. Knowing that you can speak up about concerns without fear of retribution. Having trust in your leadership and believing that the organization truly prioritizes well-being.
That makes me think about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill.
Oh, yeah.
There were so many warnings and concerns raised by workers, but they were ignored or dismissed.
Yeah.
It's like those basic needs for safety and security were never truly met.
Right.
And that contributed to a culture where people just felt like they couldn't speak up.
It's a tragic example of what can happen when those foundational needs are neglected. And it highlights how crucial it is for safety leaders to foster an environment of trust, transparency, and open communication. Think about it like, if your team's dealing with a lot of uncertainty or fear due to recent incidents or whatever, addressing those safety needs by being extra transparent about precautions, offering additional training, that can actually make them more receptive to those higher level safety initiatives.
And said, building a solid foundation before you start constructing the rest of the house.
Right, you've got to have those basics.
Okay, so Maslow gives us this framework for understanding basic human needs. What about McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y?
Okay, yeah.
Didn't that have something to do with how managers view their employees?
Absolutely. Theory X and Theory Y present two contrasting views of employee motivation.
Okay.
The Theory X is kind of that more traditional approach, assumes that workers are inherently lazy, dislike work, and need to be closely supervised and controlled.
So lots of rules, lots of punishments, not a lot of trust.
Essentially, yes. And while that might work in some situations, it can also create a culture of fear and resentment,
Right.
which isn't exactly conducive to a strong safety culture.
Right, because people are constantly worried about getting in trouble. They're less likely to speak up about hazards or near misses. They might even try to hide mistakes.
Right.
Which just makes things more dangerous in the long run.
Exactly. And that's where Theory Y comes in. It takes a more optimistic view.
Okay.
It assumes that workers are inherently capable, self-motivated, and willing to take responsibility if they're given the right environment.
So instead of viewing employees as problems to be controlled, you see them as valuable assets who can contribute to safety if they're empowered and trusted.
Precisely. And this shift in mindset can have a huge impact on how you design those safety programs.
Okay.
If you believe in Theory X, you might be tempted to rely on top-down enforcement and punishment. But if you embrace Theory Y, you're more likely to focus on collaboration, employee involvement, and creating a sense of shared ownership over safety.
Have you ever worked in a place where it's just like tons of safety rules, but nobody really follows them? I feel like that's maybe a sign of the Theory X approach gone wrong.
Yeah.
People need to buy into safety, not just be forced into it.
Right. It's like that old saying, rules without relationship leads to rebellion. If people don't feel respected or valued, they're less likely to follow the rules, even if it's for their own good.
How do we shift toward a Theory Y environment then?
That's the question, right? I think it starts with giving your team more ownership over those safety procedures, letting them have a say in how things are done. Could that help create a more proactive safety culture?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
Absolutely. When people feel like they're part of the solution, not just the problem, they're more likely to take ownership and be proactive.
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture where safety isn't just something imposed from above, but something everyone feels responsible for.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've got Maslow talking about basic needs.
Yeah.
McGregor giving us those contrasting views of motivation.
Right.
What about Herzberg?
Okay.
Didn't he have something to do with satisfaction and motivation?
He did Herzberg's Motivation-Hygiene theory, sometimes called the two-factor theory. It's all about what truly motivates people at work.
Okay.
He proposed that there are two sets of factors at play: hygiene factors and motivators.
Okay, break that down for me. What are these hygiene factors?
Hygiene factors are things like decent working conditions, fair pay job security, and basic safety equipment. Their absence causes dissatisfaction,
Right.
but their presence doesn't necessarily lead to motivation.
So like you're not getting paid fairly.
Right.
Or your workplace is literally dangerous. You're going to be unhappy.
You're not going to be happy.
But just fixing those issues
Right.
won't necessarily make you love your job or go above and beyond.
Exactly. Think of it as kind of the bare minimum, the things
Yeah.
that need to be in place to prevent people from being miserable.
Yeah.
But to really motivate people, you need to tap into those motivators. Those are things like achievement recognition,
Yeah.
responsibility opportunities for growth, and the work itself being interesting and challenging.
So it's about feeling like you're making a meaningful contribution, having ownership over your work,
Yeah.
and being recognized for your accomplishments.
Right.
How does that translate into safety, though?
I think we've all seen those workplaces where safety feels like a chore, just checking boxes.
Yeah.
And Herzberg's theory is telling us we need to aim higher instead of just handing out hard hats. What if we created a program where teams get rewarded for coming up with innovative safety solutions?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Or gave them more autonomy to design and implement their own safety procedures? That's tapping into those powerful motivation factors.
It's about making safety more than just a set of rules to follow. It's about giving people a chance to be creative, to solve problems, and to feel a sense of pride in their work.
Right.
It's like turning safety into a source of job satisfaction rather than just a source of stress.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in how people approach safety on a day-to-day basis.
This is really starting to click for me. We've gone from basic needs with Maslow to contrasting views of motivation with McGregor. And now we're talking about actually finding ways to make safety motivating with Herzberg.
Right.
So I'm starting to see how these theories can give us a whole new perspective on how we approach safety leadership.
And that's the power of these frameworks. They really provide a lens for understanding why people behave the way they do and how we can influence those behaviors to create a safer work environment.
This is awesome. So we've covered Maslow, McGregor, and Herzberg. What other management theories should we have on our radar as safety professionals?
There are a few others that I think are particularly relevant to continuous improvement and adapting our approach to different situations. Have you ever heard of the Deming Cycle?
I think so. Isn't that the one with the plan, day, check, act steps?
You got it. The Deming Cycle, or PDCA, is all about creating a systematic approach to problem solving and continuous improvement. And you can apply it to virtually anything, including safety.
Okay, so walk me through how this would work in a real-world safety scenario.
Let's say you've noticed an increase in near misses involving a particular piece of equipment.
Okay.
The first step, plan, would involve gathering data, analyzing those near misses to try to figure out the root causes and developing a plan to address those causes.
So we're not just jumping to conclusions. We're taking the time to really understand what's going on.
Right.
Maybe it's a training issue. Maybe it's a design flaw. Maybe it's something else entirely.
Exactly. The do phase is where you implement that plan.
Okay.
So maybe you revise the training program, modify the equipment, implement a new safety procedure, And then comes the check phase, where you monitor the situation to see if your changes are having the desired effect.
Okay.
Are you seeing a decrease in near misses? Are people using the equipment safely?
So it's not just about making changes. It's about making sure those changes are actually working.
Right. And finally, the act phase is where you standardize those changes if they've been successful, or go back to the drawing board if they haven't. The Deming cycle is a continuous loop, always striving for improvement.
That's so cool. It's like a constant process of learning and refining. What about that other theory you mentioned? The one about adapting your approach to different situations.
You're thinking of contingency theory. It emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to management.
Okay.
The best leadership style or safety strategy will really depend on the specific context, the nature of the work, the people involved, the level of risk, and a host of other factors.
It's about being flexible,
Right.
being able to read the room,
Yeah.
and adapting your approach
Yeah.
to fit the situation. That makes a lot of sense, especially in the world of safety, where things can change so quickly.
Exactly. And this is where understanding that those different management styles we talked about earlier can come in handy.
Yeah.
Remember those autocratic, permissive,
Yeah.
directive, democratic?
Yeah. It's like a spectrum of leadership approaches,
Yeah.
ranging from my way or the highway
Yeah.
to let's all decide together.
Right. And while each style has its pros and cons, the key is to know when to apply which one.
Right.
For example, in an emergency situation, you might need a more autocratic leader
Right.
who can make those quick decisions.
Right.
But for day-to-day safety management, a more democratic or collaborative approach
Yeah.
might be more effective.
So it's about having a range of leadership tools in your toolbox.
Right.
And knowing which tool to use for the job at hand. It's like being a safety chameleon,
I like that.
able to adapt your style to whatever situation you encounter.
Exactly. And that adaptability is crucial for building a truly resilient safety culture.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
There's so much more we could talk about.
I know, right? This has been a mind-blowing journey through the world of management theories and how they can be applied to safety. But before we wrap up this part of our discussion, is there anything else you want to highlight or any key takeaways you want to emphasize for our listeners?
One thing I want to stress is that these theories are tools, not rigid rules. It's not about memorizing definitions or applying them blindly. It's about understanding the underlying principles and using them to inform your decisions and actions as a safety leader.
Okay, yeah.
So think critically about your own workplace, your team dynamics, and the specific challenges you face. Which of these theories resonate most with you? How can you use them to create a safer and more positive work environment?
That's a great point. It's about using these theories as lenses to view our own workplaces and to think more strategically about how we approach safety leadership. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a moment to continue our exploration of safety in management. Welcome back to Key Safety Talks on YouTube. Before we went to commercial, we were talking about how these classic management theories can be incredibly useful tools for safety professionals.
Right.
But it's one thing to understand the theory. How do we actually put these ideas into practice?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer is it's an ongoing process. It's about constantly observing, reflecting, experimenting to find what works best in your specific context.
Okay.
But I think these theories can provide a roadmap, helping us ask the right questions and make more informed decisions.
So let's say I'm a safety manager and I'm thinking, okay, I get these theories, but how do I actually make them work for me?
Right.
Where do I even start?
Well, one way to approach it is to think about the specific challenges you're facing in your workplace.
Are you struggling to get people to report near misses? Is there a lack of buy-in for your safety programs? Are you dealing with a lot of resistance to change? Once you've identified those pain points, you can start to look at the theories through that lens.
So I'm having trouble with near-miss reporting. Maybe I look to Maslow and I think, are my employees feeling safe enough to speak up?
Right.
Or maybe I consider theory Y and I ask, am I creating an environment where people feel empowered to share their concerns without fear of punishment?
Exactly. Those theories can help you diagnose those underlying issues and come up with more targeted solutions. Instead of just implementing another generic safety program, you're addressing the root causes of the behavior you're trying to change.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being more strategic, more intentional with our approach to safety leadership. It's not just about doing more stuff. It's about doing the right stuff.
Right. And it's about recognizing that People are complex, they're motivated by different things, they respond to different leadership styles, and they have different needs.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to safety.
Which brings us back to contingency theory, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Being able to adapt our approach to different situations and different people. Do you have any examples of how this might play out in the real world?
Absolutely. Think about the different types of work environments in a high-risk industry, like construction or manufacturing, where the consequences of a mistake can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
You might need a more directive leadership style, at least in certain situations. Clear instructions, close supervision, and a strong emphasis on following procedures are essential.
But that same approach might backfire in a more creative or research-oriented environment.
Right.
Where you need to encourage innovation and risk-taking.
Exactly. In that kind of setting, a more collaborative and democratic leadership style might be more effective. You want to create a culture where people feel comfortable sharing ideas, challenging assumptions, and experimenting.
So it's about matching your leadership style to the demands of the situation. But it's also about knowing your team, what motivates them, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how they respond to different approaches.
Absolutely. And that's where things like emotional intelligence and communication skills become crucial.
Okay.
A good safety leader needs to be able to read people, build relationships, and communicate effectively.
Which brings us to another really important piece of the puzzle, communication.
Yes.
We talk about it all the time in safety, but it's often easier said than done.
It is.
What are some of the key principles of effective safety communication, especially in the context of these management theories we've been discussing?
Well, I think that the first principle is clarity.
Go.
Safety messages should be clear, concise, and easy to understand. Avoid jargon. Use plain language. And make sure the message is relevant to the audience and the task at hand.
So no more 10-page safety manuals that nobody reads.
Hopefully not. The second principle is consistency. Safety messages should be delivered consistently across all channels. Toolbox talks, safety meetings, emails, signage, and they should be reinforced regularly.
It's about creating that drumbeat of safety, constantly reminding people of the importance of safe behaviors.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that communication is a two-way street.
Okay.
It's not just about sending messages out. It's also about listening to feedback, addressing concerns, and making sure people feel heard.
That makes me think about the importance of psychological safety, which we touched on earlier with Maslow.
Right.
If people don't feel safe speaking up, then even the clearest and most consistent communication won't be effective.
Yeah, that's a great point. You have to create that environment of trust where people feel comfortable sharing their observations, raising concerns, and asking questions without fear of retribution.
So how do we do that? How do we actually foster that kind of psychological safety in the workplace?
It starts with leadership. Leaders who are approachable, who listen actively, and who genuinely value input from their team can make a huge difference. And it's about being vulnerable yourself, admitting when you don't have all the answers, being open to feedback, and modeling that kind of open and honest communication.
It's about walking the talk, right?
Exactly.
If you say you want people to speak up, but then you shoot down every idea, or get defensive when someone criticizes your approach, then you're not really creating a safe space for communication.
Actions speak louder than words. You have to demonstrate through your behavior that you genuinely value people's input and that you're committed to creating a culture where everyone feels safe to speak their mind.
It's like building a culture of respect where everyone's voice is valued, regardless of their position or experience level.
Exactly. And that kind of culture can be incredibly powerful, not just for safety, but for overall performance and well-being.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of clarity, consistency, and two-way communication. Are there any other communication tips or strategies you want to share, especially for safety professionals?
One thing that's really helpful is to use storytelling.
Oh, I love that. Stories are so powerful, they can really bring safety messages to life.
Exactly. So instead of just telling people to wear their PPE, share a story about someone who was seriously injured because they weren't wearing their safety glasses.
Right.
Or if you're trying to get people to report near misses, share a story about how a near-miss investigation led to the discovery of a serious hazard that could have resulted in a major incident.
It's about making those safety messages
Yes.
more relatable, more human.
Exactly. And it's about using those stories to illustrate the why behind the rules. People are much more likely to buy into something when they understand the reasoning behind it.
That makes so much sense. Instead of just saying, do this because I said so.
Right.
You're saying, do this because it could save your life.
Yeah.
Or the lives of your colleagues.
Exactly. And those stories don't have to be long or complicated. Even a short anecdote can have a big impact.
This is great stuff. I'm already starting to think about all the different ways I can improve my own communication as a safety professional. What about visual communication?
Okay.
Things like poster signage and videos. How can we make those more effective?
That's a great question. Visuals can be incredibly powerful, but they need to be well-designed and strategically placed.
Okay.
So think about the message you're trying to convey and the audience you're trying to reach. Keep it simple, use strong imagery, and make sure the visuals are relevant to the work environment.
So no more generic safety posters with cheesy slogans.
Hopefully not. The best visuals are those that are specific to the hazards and tasks in that particular workplace. And they should be placed where people will actually see them, not just hidden away in a break room or behind a stack of boxes.
That's so true. I've seen so many safety posters that are just ignored because they're either irrelevant or invisible.
Right. It's about being intentional with your visual communication, just like you are with your verbal communication.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on communication. Before we move on, are there any other key points you want to emphasize, or any real-world examples you want to share that illustrate the power of effective communication in safety?
One of the best examples I can think of is the aviation industry.
Yeah.
Over the years, they've developed a truly remarkable safety culture, and communication has been a key driver of that success. Think about the pre-flight briefings that pilots and crew members conduct before every flight.
Oh yeah, those are like mini safety meetings.
Yeah.
Where they go over the flight plan, discuss potential hazards, and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And those briefings aren't just about following procedures. They're about creating a shared understanding of the risks involved and fostering a collaborative approach to safety. Everyone has a voice, everyone is encouraged to speak up, and everyone is responsible for safety.
It's like that saying, if you see something, say something. But in aviation, they take it a step further. It's more like, if you think something, say something.
Exactly. They've created a culture where people feel comfortable sharing their concerns, even if they're not 100% sure about something. And that's because they understand that even a seemingly minor observation could potentially prevent a major incident.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how open and honest communication can create a much safer work environment. It's not about being perfect. It's about being proactive and working together to identify and mitigate risks.
Exactly. And that's something we can all strive for in our own workplaces, regardless of the industry.
This has been an incredible conversation. I feel like I'm walking away with a toolbox full of new ideas and strategies for improving safety communication.
Yep.
But before we wrap up this part of our discussion, is there anything else you want to highlight or any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway is that communication is more than just a task to check off your list. It's the foundation of a strong safety culture. It's about building relationships, fostering trust, and creating an environment where everyone feels valued, heard, and empowered to contribute to safety.
It's about making safety a conversation, not a lecture.
Exactly. And it's a conversation that we need to be having constantly, not just during safety meetings or training sessions.
That's a great point. Safety communication should be woven into the fabric of our daily interactions, not just an isolated event.
Absolutely. And it's a conversation that we all need to be a part of, from the CEO to the frontline worker. Everyone has a role to play in creating a safer work environment.
On that note, we're going to take another quick break. But don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a moment to wrap up our discussion of management theories and safety. Welcome back to Key Safety Talks on YouTube. We've been having a fascinating discussion about how these classic management theories can give us a whole new perspective on safety leadership. But it's not just about understanding the theory, it's about putting these ideas into action and creating a culture of continuous improvement.
Absolutely. A stagnant safety culture is a vulnerable one. We need to be constantly learning, adapting, and striving to do better. And that's where things like the Deming Cycle and incident investigations become so crucial.
All right, we talked about the Deming Cycle earlier, that plan, do, check, act loop. It's like a roadmap for continuous improvement.
Yeah.
But how do we actually apply it to real-world safety challenges?
Let's take a real-world example. Imagine you're seeing a spike in musculoskeletal injuries in your warehouse.
Okay.
Using the Deming Cycle, you'd start by planning. That means gathering data, maybe looking at incident reports, conducting observations, even talking to employees about their experiences. You're trying to pinpoint the root causes of these injuries.
Okay.
Is it improper lifting techniques, faulty equipment, poor ergonomics, workstation design?
So it's like detective work gathering clues to figure out what's really going on.
Exactly. And once you have a good understanding of the root causes, you move to the do phase. This is where you implement solutions based on your analysis. Maybe you provide additional training on lifting techniques, invest in new equipment redesign workstations, or implement a stretching program.
So we're taking action, but we're not done yet, right?
Right. The next step is check. You monitor the situation to see if your changes are having the desired effect. Are you seeing fewer musculoskeletal injuries? Are employees reporting less pain or discomfort? Are they using the new equipment and techniques correctly?
It's like running an experiment and collecting data to see if our hypothesis was correct.
Exactly. And based on that data, you move to the act phase. If the changes are working, you standardize them, make them part of your regular procedures. But if they're not having the desired impact, you go back to the drawing board, reassess the situation, and try something else.
So it's a continuous cycle of learning and improvement.
Wow.
Always striving to make things safer and healthier for everyone. I love that. What about incident investigations? How do those fit into this continuous improvement mindset?
Incident investigations are absolutely essential for learning from our mistakes and preventing future incidents. But it's not just about finding fault or blaming individuals. It's about understanding the underlying factors, the system weaknesses, the communication breakdowns, the cultural influences that contributed to the event.
So it's more about understanding the why behind the incident, not just the who or the how.
Exactly. Think about the Chernobyl disaster.
Oh, wow.
One of the contributing factors was a lack of a safety culture that encouraged open communication and transparency. People were afraid to speak up about concerns, and there was a reluctance to acknowledge problems.
That's a chilling example of how a failure to learn from near misses and incidents can lead to catastrophic consequences.
It is, and it highlights the importance of approaching incident investigations with a learning mindset, a willingness to challenge assumptions, and a commitment to identifying systemic solutions.
So how do we actually do that? How do we make sure our incident investigations are truly effective?
One technique that can be really helpful is the 5 whys. It's a deceptively simple approach, but it can be incredibly powerful for getting to the root cause of a problem.
I remember you mentioned that earlier. It's about asking why repeatedly, like a curious child, until you get to the bottom of things.
Exactly. So let's say you're investigating a forklift accident. You start by asking, why did the accident happen? The answer might be because the forklift tipped over. Then you ask, why did the forklift tip over? The answer might be because the load was unevenly distributed. And you keep asking why. Why was the load unevenly distributed? Why wasn't the load properly secured? Until you get to the root cause, which might be something like inadequate training on load securement or a lack of clear procedures for loading and unloading materials.
So it's about digging deeper, going beyond the surface level explanation to understand the underlying systems and behaviors that contributed to the incident.
Exactly. And once you've identified those root causes, you can then develop targeted solutions to prevent similar incidents from happening again. Maybe it's revising your training program, improving your procedures, or implementing new safety controls.
It's like turning a negative event into a positive learning opportunity.
I love that. So we've talked about the Deming cycle and incident investigations, but are there any other tools or strategies that can help us create a culture of continuous improvement in safety? Absolutely. Things like safety audits, data analysis, employee feedback, benchmarking against industry best practices, those are all valuable tools in our continuous improvement arsenal. And it's not just about implementing these tools, it's about creating a culture where everyone is engaged in the process, where people feel empowered to speak up about concerns, and where learning and improvement are seen as everyone's responsibility.
It's like creating a safety ecosystem where everyone is working together to identify and mitigate risks, and it's a journey, not a destination, right?
Exactly. Continuous improvement is an ongoing process. It's about constantly challenging ourselves to do better, to learn from our mistakes, and to create a safer and healthier work environment for everyone.
This has been an incredible discussion. We've covered so much ground, from Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the Deming cycle, from Theory X and Theory Y to incident investigations. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of what it means to be a safety leader.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to apply these theories and strategies in their own workplaces.
Me too. Remember, safety is everyone's responsibility. And by understanding these management theories, we can create work environments that are not only productive, but also safe and healthy for everyone.
Exactly. Safety is not just a set of rules. It's a mindset, a value, a commitment to protecting ourselves and each other.
And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Key Safety Talks on YouTube. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
And remember, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to create a safer world for everyone.
Until next time, stay safe.